reaction na naman tayo rito, no? Tingnan lang po natin ito sa ginawang interview nito na The Looking Glass kay isang Australian podcaster, no? Kay Dr. Tom Wadsworth. Tingnan lang po natin, ano? Kung ano yung makapulat natin dito. Hopefully may makakuha po tayo rito. Dito sa ginagawa niya nito. Ano,
PhD, all in New Testament. Now, I'm not good with three-letter abbreviations. Is that a Masters of Theology and a Masters of Ministry and a Theology of Ministry?
Now, they're both called Master of Theology. The first one is the equivalent of an MDiv, which is a Master of Divinity, which is more common. But I got that MTH back before the school I was at had switched over to the MDiv terminology. That was back in the 70s.
Yeah. When I did my work at school, I started off doing a grad dip of biblical studies. Then it changed without, anything from me to a grad dip of theology. And then I ended up getting, again, no change from me, a grad dip in divinity. So over the time of my studying, what I was, aiming for changed. But as far as I was concerned, it was all Bible, so it was all good.
Yep, same here.
So if you would just give us an introduction, I'm pretty sure that people that are watching this already know who you are and may or may not have seen your information videos. But for the purpose of this particular video, what I want to do is lay a foundation, sure, but move on from the basics so that, people are going to get the basics from any video they watch or the videos that you have on your channel. What I want here is let's explore some of these implications. So for starters, give us an idea of where this idea came from in your experience, and also maybe go into the biblical words that are translated worship that caused such a stir and is causing such a stir with the people that watch your videos.
Yeah, good, Josh. Well, it started almost 50 years ago for me. I was preaching in a church, and I was preaching through 1 Corinthians, came to chapter 14, which talks about speaking in tongues. And I was tempted to skip over the chapter because it deals with speaking in tongues, and my church didn't do that. It was also a volatile topic at the time. But I thought, well, there must be something in this chapter. After all, I found out that this is the longest chapter in the Bible that deals with the Christian assembly, what Christians are to do in that assembly and what they're not to do and what it's all for. And I was stunned while reading it that this particular Greek word started to pop up again. It's the Greek word oikodome, which means to edify, edification. Everything, Paul says, that you do in a Christian assembly must be done to build up other Christians, to make them stronger, to make them more mature, make them better Christians. That's the purpose of everything you do in the assembly. And what surprised me is that he never said, remember that we gather together to worship God. After all, this is a house of worship where we meet. We have a worship pastor. We started our worship with this, and we're going to close our worship soon with that. And we have an order of worship that we follow. And none of that language is biblical, as it turns out. None of that, all that language is foreign to the New Testament, which is shocking to me. So that began a years-long study of every time the word worship is found in the Bible, to see what it means, see what the Greek word behind it is, see what the Hebrew word is behind it. And my thesis, stated briefly and most offensively, is that the Christian assembly in the New Testament was not done to worship God. The things that they did in their assembly, they never would have called them worship. They wouldn't have called them a service. They wouldn't have called it a worship service. Rather, everything that they did in their assemblies was for edification. They were different things done to edify one another. And so that was the thing that I found. Now, this idea stuck with me for 40 years until 2016, I decided to take my conclusions and take them into a doctoral program. to get a PhD in New Testament, focusing on this very topic, to throw these ideas up against a PhD wall and see what sticks. And that's what I did. My whole dissertation was on this topic, and sure enough, this stuff sticks.
I'm interested to know, what did it produce in you after finding out what you've just told us? How then did you respond to it? I mean, you were saying that you were a pastor. Are you still a pastor?
And at that point, my study wasn't that deep. I needed to go much deeper into it to figure out what's going on in the New Testament. So, but my first reactions to it were, number one, this is strange, this is odd, and I guess I'm going to have to be one of those people that's declared a false teacher and a heretic, because I'm just going to follow what the Bible says, and I don't care what any church says it's supposed to be. I'm going with the Bible. Yeah, that's literally what my attitude was, and I know that's very dangerous. That's a career limiting move, and eventually there was a lot of rocky periods in my ministry, primarily due from that first sermon. There was a time when I was asked to go be a teacher at a Christian college in their Bible department. That got torpedoed because some guy heard about my sermon, thought I was the worst heretic on the planet, and I never got to teach where they had hired me to teach. So eventually I got out of the ministry in 1985. And I've been out of the ministry for 30 years, working mostly in the corporate world in corporate communications. But I kept coming back to this issue again and again and again, and I kept teaching classes and preaching in churches as a part-time only, not full-time. But I knew this topic needed to be addressed, and so that's why I did the PhD program. Now that I'm retired, I'm 71 years old, and now I can devote full-time to talking about this, and I am armed to the teeth with biblical and theological reasons why this stuff is actually solid.
So let's get into some of these ideas. And I think the biggest idea that people are going to run into that's going to be hard for them is the idea of meaning of words. So you talk about an anachronistic fallacy in your dissertation. And what I've noticed is that if someone says worship, I'm not sure what they mean. You know, people use that term so much. What are the biblical terms, the Greek ones in the New Testament, that are translated worship into English?
Yes. Okay. There's basically 5 of them, depending on which English translation you're going to be using. But we're talking about 5 words, and really it's just 2 that are really the primary words. Proskuneo.
Mm-hmm.
And it is translated as to prostrate yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really abundantly clear. The lexicons agree on that point, that it should be translated proskuneo in at least 50% of the time. But the lexicons and the English translations will contend that when proskuneo happens before God, that it should be translated to worship. But my research blew me away when I realized that no. It also means to prostrate yourself when proskuneo is used before a deity, whether it's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the temple in Jerusalem, or whether it's a pagan god in a pagan temple. People would come there. The first thing that they would do is prostrate themselves before that deity. Same thing the Jews did in Jerusalem. So that word means to prostrate yourself. I have a lot of reasons for that, but let's just leave that right there. If you want to go deeper, we can. The second word is latruo, or the noun form latreia. And there's a word that is translated usually as service, but occasionally as worship. But it doesn't mean what Christians do in their assembly. It never did. And by the way, proskuneo never refers to something that Christians do in their assembly either. As I mentioned at the beginning, all these Greek words, none of them are used with reference to what Christians do in their assemblies. Let's get that through our head to begin with. But so what does the word mean? Well, it means either to prostrate yourself, if it's proskuneo. If it's latruo, it means sacrificing. Now, there is a specific Greek word for sacrificing, thuo, or the noun form thusia, to refer to a sacrifice, but really latruo refers to serving deity with sacrifice. It's the sacrificing process, a literal sacrifice, killing the blood of bulls and goats and splattering it upon the altar. This is latreia, and as also something that people did in the temple, whether it's the Jerusalem temple for Jews or whether it is a pagan temple for pagans. They would also have an altar and they would slaughter animals there. Yeah, good, Josh. It is used in a figurative sense or metaphorical sense or a spiritual sense, as in Romans 12:1, the passage that everybody knows. Therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, I beseech you to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your logikain latreia, your sometimes it's your spiritual service or your spiritual worship or your rational worship. However it is translated, it's the Greek word latreia there. And it's clearly referring again to sacrificing, because he uses various sacrificial terms in that verse. To offer, the verb offer is used often with you offer sacrifices. Offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. There's thusia. There's the word for sacrifice right there. A holy and acceptable. Sacrifices in the Old Testament needed to be holy and acceptable. And this is your reasonable latreia today. It's reasonable or it's spiritual because we don't literally offer blood sacrifices on an altar anymore. And every Christian knew that in the first century. But it's our reasonable service. What we do now is we offer our bodies as a living sacrifice. It must be holy and acceptable. This is the way of life that we now have. It really, again, there's nothing in the context.
Sacrifice charm for wit, but no goats have to die for me to do that. And also what I'm noticing is what is not in Romans 1 and 2, which is actually one of my favorite verses in the whole entire Bible. There is, where's the tabernacle? So if in Christian thought, offerings and sacrifices and sacrificial language is all focused on the tabernacle and the altar that is in the tabernacle, which is God's house, where God's presence is, where in the New Testament is the tabernacle?
Yes. Well, this begins then a whole other aspect of my study, which involved the temple or the tabernacle, as you describe it there. Take the word tabernacle or the word temple and run it every time you find it in the New Testament to find out what is the Christian attitude toward this thing known as the temple. Well, literally, it was the place where God resided in Jerusalem. It was called the dwelling place of God. That very phrase is found frequently in the New Testament. It was the house of God. It's where he resides. Now, they also knew that, yes, he's actually in heaven, but they regarded the temple as the dwelling place of God. But in the New Testament, in the Christian system, this temple has no meaning whatsoever anymore. Jesus predicted its absolute destruction. A whole chapter is devoted to it in Mark 13, and in Matthew 24, in Luke 17, and Luke 21. Extensive segment of Jesus' life is devoted to his famous speech about the absolute destruction of the temple. And of course, when the temple...
Guys, hopefully na makikita natin na yung talagang sacrifice, yung offering ay dinadala sa temple, pero wala na nga po yun, ano? Tandaan po natin, wala na po lahat yun. Inalis na po yun. So guys, hopefully, ituloy nyo lang po ito, yung nito, podcast nito ng Look and Glass, podcast nito ni Don Wadsworth na hopefully makatulong po ito sa inyo. So, binanggit niya po yung proskuneo sa kay Latreia, So, wala po yun sa tinatawag nating assembly, yung tinatawag na worship at yung proskuneo at Latreia. So, pag-aralan niyo pa po ito, hopefully, yun po ang dapat nating gawin sa sinasabi ng mamang ito na hopefully ito kasing pag-aaral na ginawa niya ay matagal, ano, almost 50 years na pag-aaral. Doon lang po sa ano na ito, sa subject na ito, na kung bakit niya na sinasabi how we got worship wrong, ano, kung bakit na niya nababanggit ito. So hanggang dito na lang guys, ano, at medyo mahaba na po, at kayo na po magpatuloy na painggan itong si Tom Wadsworth. Actually yung kanyang ano series po, 7 yan eh, 7. Ah, pakinggan niyo po ng gusto at makikita niyo po yung talagang ibig niyang ipahiwatig o iparating sa atin bilang mga ano, mga Kristiyano, bilang mananamba ng Diyos, ano. So, makakatulong po at para lalo nating maintindihan. So guys, thank you for watching, but don't forget to subscribe. Huwag niyo pong kalimutan mag-like, share, and subscribe lang po, no, sa ating channel, Ano ang Palagay Mo. So, muli, bye-bye na po. At tandaan po natin, tanong muna bago husgahan, no? Bago natin husgahan ang kabuuan ng kanyang mga sinasabi o yung kanyang mga tinuturo, ay tayo po ay mag-ano, saliksik, magtanong muna. Okay, muli, thank you. God bless you. Bye.